I
Uh,
had no idea that was possible.
if it's feasible, if it's doable, I will do everything I can to help them pull it off.
I'm Marvel. This channel exists to connect gamers to MMOs they'll love. In this series, you will hear answers from a Project Gorgon game master covering questions you asked, including monetization, accusations of a GM abusing power, future content, and more. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more MMO content.
I technically became the first guide of the guide program, and I believe Lemons was the second.
Is that effectively a game master?
I'm not 100% certain. I guess it would be on a lower level, seeing that they technically are not employees of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I guess a volunteers would be a better term.
Okay.
But we went on with that, and we worked it out, we figured it out, and then the developers were like, we want to start developing this thing called the live event system.
Mm-hmm.
They came to me and said, would you like to help us test this out?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, well, okay, what does it involve? Well, because of licensing and security and all of that, for me to get that level of access to the system, I would have to become an employee of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, hell yeah, where do I sign?
So it was a non-trivial request. It was an employment offer.
Yes, it was an employment offer. And I said, hell yeah. And, we went through all the paperwork, and I had to sign, the standard contracts and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And I became an admin. That was August 1st of 2018.
Wow, so coming up on 4 years.
Yes, the 1st of August will be my 4-year adminversary, as we've come to call it.
So come to think of it, if you started about 6 years ago, you quickly scaled through the ranks, it seems.
I did, and it's fairy tale level stuff. It really is.
A fitting metaphor, considering we're talking about Project Gorgon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I first started this game, if someone were to come up and tell me, you're going to be a developer in this game, I would have told them they were out of their damn mind.
Sure.
And it all happened, and I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't give it up for the world. I mean, unless of course they fire me or something. But
Yeah. Well, I love the trajectory of the story, because when we first started talking, you brought up a horrifying health incident that, had the details changed differently, we may not have exchanged this pleasant, trade of words.
exactly, and
Yeah, and you
because
had to go ahead.
back when I got out of high school, that was my dream, to build a video game.
Sure.
And well, I kind of life got in the way and did its thing and kind of dragged me away, and I went to more of the hardware side, the software side. So
Sure.
I became a technician for
Mm-hmm.
the majority of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I laugh about it today, and I even talk when I banter with the players in game. I tell the story. I'm sure all the vet players are like, oh God, he's talking about that again. But I joke that I
Yeah.
had to die to get this job, because it literally, had that not happened, I probably would have kept playing Star Wars for another year or two, and the dots may not have connected.
Yeah, it literally is a Phoenix story, and it reminds me of the idea that before a resurrection, there has to be a death. And with respect to your own personal and professional journey with respect to Project Gorgon, that is what happened. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, it's awesome. I couldn't have asked for a better ending.
Yeah, and hopefully it's just the beginning.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Because
Project Gorgon is still technically in early access. I suppose we could talk about that distinction formally, maybe at a different date, but it sounds like the snowball is continuing to gain momentum.
oh yeah, because they hand me this, they hand me that, and it grows, because we started out with the live event system, and they said, okay, I need you to come up with a list of potential things that we can do with the system. So I was like, okay. So I kind of mulled over it for a while, and that's how the civil service event was born. Uh, that's how the world boss event was born. Pretty much all of the live events were born from the initial testing of the live event system.
Now, inform me, is it accurate to say that this array of events you just mentioned, are these automated or are these all GM led?
They are.
Or is there a blur?
There's a bit of a blur there. Like the
Okay.
weekend long events, like the world bosses originally in their first revision, I'd have to sit down and I would have to program by hand every single entity that was involved. If I needed to make a loot box, I'd have to spawn it, turn it into a loot box, tell it what to give, tell it when to give it, and stuff
Very
like that.
manual.
Yes, it's very manual, but it's also very detailed.
Sure.
Zeiton did a very good job on it, and then once we got comfortable that these events ran good, I was like, oh my God, this is killing me. I'm having to spend, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours to pre-stage one event.
Sure.
So they were like, okay, here, have some source code. So I was like, okay. And I started to learn how to build and script NPCs
Hmm.
and quote unquote hard code the
Hmm.
stuff rather than use the dynamic totems and stuff that are in the live event system.
Sure.
So all of the events started to evolve and things started to become more static. And that's kind of where we are at now. I mean, we're still doing iterations on all of the events.
And one of them, I believe I enjoyed personally. I believe it was a number of weeks ago on a Monday night, in which a group of Ranalongs, undead, and goblins assaulted Durston at the inn, led
Yes.
by Servius, the Shadow Deer. Were you the mastermind behind that?
Yes. Yeah,
That's
I
hilarious.
actually I created the first. I created actually quite a few invasion style events, and those are the more dynamic part of them. Using the live event system, I can set dynamic spawners, and I can have them spawn pretty much anything that's spawnable in the game. And there's a few commands where I can use. I can tell them run from this point to this point and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, how can I use this? Oh, okay, I know what to do. I'd go set up a few spawners on the other side of the hill, and I just visualize this mass of goblins just coming over the hill charging, and I was like, okay, I think this could work. And so that's when the Serbu Hills invasion was born, and the spider invasion in Serbule was born.
I have yet to experience the spider invasion, but I
It,
did
it, it
enjoy the goblin one.
it's a little more engulfing because there are a lot of spiders involved.
And that's thematic. That's reasonable.
I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of spiders, but everybody loves it, and that's probably one of the things that tickle me the most about being an admin and especially running these events. In most games, death is a no-no. You don't die. That is
Sure.
sin.
Hmm.
And in Gorgon, death is encouraged.
Yeah,
And
it does flip the expectation.
it does.
You
And
realize, wait, I've been rewarded because I died uniquely?
yeah, I mean, my first death way, way back when in the newbie dungeon's like, wait, I leveled what?
Right. Yeah. I forget what the skill is. Is it literally death or dying?
Yeah, it's the dying skill.
It reminds me of Kinshi. I'm not sure if you've played it at all, but one of the core fundamental principles of growth in that RPG is actually done through losing. And as someone who's trained to martial arts, that's actually the exact way it works. And so I like I said, my first RPG or not my RPG, first MMO RPG was EverQuest, in which you did everything in your power not to die, And then when you finally did die, it often robbed you of many hours of progress, and you had to do a corpse run. Now, with that said, I have many memories that after the fact I look back fondly, but during the moment were heart crushing, soul crushing, and grinding.
Yes, yes,
Yet
yes, yes, and yes.
Yet Project Gorgon flips that expectation, and you realize that it's actually an invitation to learn how different mobs. How do I suppose I'm exploring an idea in real time here. You wonder if you die from a new mob, how that could develop your character, and losing in these unique circumstances is actually a trajectory of player growth, and that is actually more intuitive than the other way around. And it's fun to see that idea manifested in Project Gorgon.
Well, yeah, it's good to see the links because the irony of it, leveling your dying skill also gives you synergy levels in necromancy.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, it's like, I in the early days I didn't have anything, formally built like the invasions or anything like that. I just pop into the middle of town. Hey, y'all want to kill some stuff? Sure. Here, let me spawn this. Let's see what happens.
Well, that reminds me of again, I keep bringing up EverQuest here, and it is purposely done because there's a lot of Project Gorgon that does remind me of the good elements of that MMO, in which there was this direct link between the GMs and at some level the employees with the player base. And it felt like we were on the same team. And so to hear that it's that type of interactivity in Project Gorgon is ringing all the right notes in my mind in terms of how it's not that there's a competition or that the developers and the players are pit against each other, but there's this active arm linking and collaboration.
Exactly. I mean, and to this day, I'll I'll be working in the background and I'll make this new mob, or I'll build this new world boss, or there's a new piece of tech that we had put into the game. And I mean, patch day, I'm popping into town. Hey guys, who wants to help me test this out? And everybody comes a running because they know that
Sure, it's exciting.
everybody's gonna die and it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, level up your dying skill.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's the part that tickles me the most because, okay, I'm going to spawn a lot of stuff and everybody's going to die, and everybody dies and they're like, more please. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay, sure. You want more? I'll give you more. Let's spawn another
lose more.
30 extra Kraken. Let's see what happens. And that goes on for an hour because there's like 500 tombstones spread across
Sure.
Cerbule, and everybody's like, yes, Kraken tendrils.
Yeah, by losing, you are in fact winning. It's a fun idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, so because I'll see someone in chat whisper, sure, running low on Kraken tendrils, and I'm just sitting here.
They're
I'm doing
fishing.
nothing. Yeah, they do. They absolutely do because they know that most of the time I am watching. And I'll see it, I'll just happen to look over. I always have the server console up and running on one of my monitors. So
Yeah, little inside jokes.
I'm
That is
constantly
funny.
watching over there. Yeah.
I love that.
And I'll be like, not today,
Yeah.
and I'll see it pop up again. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, fine. I log in quietly and all hell breaks loose and they love it. So
No, I think that is a dynamic way to engage the player base in a way that I'm even thinking about Guild Wars 2 public events or Warhammer Online. There's a sense that they're static, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yet the idea that, I mean, it's basically an MMO version of a D&D session in which you're aware there's a real human who is negotiating and taking in all of the social data and doing something with it. It's not just a machine. And that level of engagement, I think, also helps explain why, like you mentioned, whenever these events happen, it's this event horizon for player activity.
well, yeah, because I like to. I'm sneaky. I pay attention, and a lot of time when there's sales and things like that, and we get a large burst of new players in, I'll kind of watch and I'll make sure most of them are semi settled in. They're not quite as confused as most new players get, and I'll drop in and do the spider invasion, and they're like, what the hell is this? There's so many spiders.
Yeah.
And it's finally over and the smoke clears and they're like, that was freaking awesome.
Yep.
And really that's what motivates me to keep doing these things and to keep trying to come up with new stuff.
I love hearing that because here in my notes, I in fact was hoping that we'd get to a point in conversation in which one of the onboarding components of a new player is feeling that dynamic interplay between the player base and the developers, and knowing that it's built in to your strategy, not necessarily from just a monetization point of view in terms of player retention and getting people to VIP, yet in terms of just the relational bridge between, here's this influx of players, let's introduce them to what Project Gorgon is, and this is a piece of that. And I'm really, really glad to hear that, because that's one of the questions I wanted to get to about how do you on ramp a new player into the unique elements of what Project Gorgon is. And it sounds like that is one of the forefront issues on your mind.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it does backfire. We'll get a little overzealous, and maybe someone who wasn't exactly prepared, they get lagged and they crash, and that does happen sometimes. And the player gets angry and starts yelling about it. I mean, all we really can do at that point, we're sorry that happened, but here's a couple of things that you can do to adjust so that the next time this happens, you'll be kind of prepared for it, and it won't be quite such a negative experience.
Sure, and hopefully that would also be the crashing would be unfortunate, but if someone dying, hopefully that would be an encouragement to read the text that you in fact leveled up dying, and that is a benefit to your character.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of times, if somebody dies wrong or things like that, I'll if I can pick up on it, because usually when those things are happening, there's so much going on that it's hard to focus on what's happening with one specific person or a
Yep.
situation. But if I can pick up on it and they went down and it was kind of wrong, I'll click them, I'll res them myself.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that.
Or
Excellent.
they'll be
Oh,
like they
go ahead.
got stuck with a curse, and I intended for everyone to get released of that curse when
Oh,
the event was
sure.
over. I'll throw
Yeah.
them a minor panacea so they can get rid of it and
That could be
continue
jarring.
unhindered.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
about your wife. You brought up the fact that she was not as pleased as you in terms of being a cow. So the fact that those fetters being released afterwards is helpful for them, but it's also teaching them at the same time one of the components of Project Gorgon that bosses tend. Now, my impression is that every boss I've fought with the scrolling text on your screen, all of them carry curses. I don't know if that is actually true, and you don't
Yes.
have to answer it.
No,
Yet,
yes. It's if
yeah.
if it throws the warning sign, they do possess a curse. Because that's kind of what we did with the big head boss on Newbie Island.
Yep.
Originally, back before the island existed, there was the quote unquote starter cave. And
That's when I started. Yeah.
the first boss you came across was Maronessa the cow. So we figured that maybe the cow is too much. Everybody doesn't like being cowed right out of the gate. Pardon the pun, but
You being from Texas, that makes it all the more rich.
oh yes. And that's another thing I've been getting good at over the years is puns, but that's a whole nother epic tale.
Yep. Yep.
But so we decided to iterate it, and we're like, okay, maybe we'll do something a little less invasive. So we came up with the big head boss.
Yeah, a
And
gentler curve,
right,
right?
and the
Just to
big head
teach the
boss is
lesson.
just oops, look at me, my head swole up. And actually, for new players, the curse is actually a benefit in a lot of respects, because that extra power you're not going to get from any helmet for that level.
I didn't realize that also came with a buff.
Well, the buff is the quote unquote curse for that particular one.
Right. I thought it was a callback to GoldenEye 007, the N64, in which you could, I forget exactly how you could toggle it, but by completing some sort of mission achievement in the PvP version of the game, you could toggle big heads. And so whenever I see a player with the big heads, it reminds me of this game that's by now 20 years old, 25 years old or so. But I did not realize that it also had a functional benefit too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the main lesson of it is we wanted something a little softer for the lesson,
Yeah.
you know. If
Yep.
you get this warning, things are going to happen to you.
Sure.
Sometimes they're cool, sometimes they are not so cool.
Yep.
So you have to proceed with extreme caution.
And I appreciate that the game, on one hand, doesn't take itself so seriously. At the same time, there are consequences. And so it's oxymoronic almost in that you have to deal with the failure of not properly proceeding, yet the effect could be your head swells or you turn into a cow. That's hilarious, yet it's also commensurate with the degree of failure. That to me is a really fun idea.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, it's one of the harder things of being an admin because you know somebody will stumble across like the cow, for example, and they're like, "Well, I don't really want to be a cow," and you know,
Sure,
you
sure.
you know, it you know the sympathetic side of the admin is like, you know, I could give you a minor panacea for that, but this wasn't a live event, and you have to learn your lesson. So I have to be mean and say no.
And at the same time, it is this ties to the player responsibility in that you could have chosen not to move forward, and now you know.
Yeah, exactly. And most of the time, and a lot of people don't realize it because in a lot of games it just doesn't happen. And it
Right.
goes back to the stellar community. You can know,
Yep.
hey, I got stuck with this curse, help. And again, 99.9% of the time
You'll get
somebody's
it.
going to
Yep.
respond, we're
Yep.
we're on our way, we'll help you get rid of it.
Yep. Absolutely. While that has not yet happened to me, when I can say with the other elements that I have needed help with, anchoring back to my observation about Sunvale after gulping the cauldron of vile thoughts, within, I don't know, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, someone was able to help me out. So, absolutely.
All right. So what do you want to cover next?
So far, we have covered quite a bit. Are there any other statements you want to make regarding your professional journey? Or we could jump to, I mean, we've already spoken for quite a bit. It feels like we could talk forever. There are three general categories that I'd like to get to in terms of the types of questions that I was able to field from different MMOers, whether they were on the outskirts with respect to Project Gorgon or the most loyal players. And then it's my understanding that there are some components that you also want to share as well. So if there's anything else you want to add about your professional journey, what your role looks like, how you interact with the community, we can go there. Or if you want to jump to those questions fielded by MMOers in general, we can go there too. I'll yield to you.
Well, I mean, pretty much as far as the job goes, you know, I'm one of my core jobs, and actually that was my official title when I became an admin, was I am the live event coordinator.
Oh, cool.
Now, not only do I design quote unquote static events and things for Project Gorgon, I also work with the player base to assist them in holding their own events. And we openly welcome that. You know, if an individual or a guild has a cool idea and wants to run an event, they have to do is reach out to me, and if it's feasible, if it's doable, I will do everything I can to help them pull it off.
I
Uh,
had no idea that was possible.
yeah,
That's incredible.
absolutely.
And I wonder if there's, oh, and maybe it's simply my own ignorance. I wish that utility was more widely known. This is literally the first time I've heard of it, but to me, that's a potential selling point.
Yeah, I mean, eventually we'll probably do it a little more widespread. I mean, I do mention it in game when bantering with players, but yeah, absolutely. For example, there is one guild that likes to do a Gourmand XP event, and you know, I'm not going to hold the guild's hand and do all of the work for them, but they cook up all of the, they come up with the menu, they actually go out and gather the materials in game as they normally would, and they make 100 of this and 50 of that and 100 of this and 100 of this and 75 of this, And, mechanically, like the dispenser boxes that you can craft,
Mm-hmm.
one person can only deploy a maximum of 3 of those.
Okay.
So for the event, they had like 45 different foods.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's going to require 15 people maxing out their dispensers.
Mm-hmm.
And well, the life of those dispensers is pretty limited. So they may actually despawn before the event is over.
Defeating the whole purpose.
Right. And I mean, they'll get the food back when the box despawns, but they would have to redeploy it, refill it, and things like that. And then it gets dicey because when you redeploy it, somebody who took from the other box can take from the new one, and people start double dipping. And
Yep.
so they came to me, and I have static dispenser boxes from the live event system.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would do is they would hand me all of the food, and I would deploy a layout of dispensers, a day or two before the event, and I would fill them up, and I would give each box a custom name saying what it is, what gourmand level, and all of that, and set the dispenser, one per person, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm done, I can hide them,
Mm-hmm.
and I can quote unquote save all of those boxes for later, and then later I can turn it on, they all pop up, and everybody gets to chewing.
Yep.
And and when it's done, I can empty them all out, and I can give the leftover food back to the guild.
In other words, you're not doing the work for the players, but you are extending the utility of that work.
Yeah, I'm basically giving them the ability that of an admin. I mean, of course, they don't actually get to do those things themselves. I have to do it.
Sure.
But I mean, it opens up so many possibilities. Like another guild does a game called Deer Tag,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody's a deer, everybody has to chase him and catch him. Well, instead of having to go stock up, I kind of threw in on that one. I just created 2 totems to where you could turn into a deer and one where you can undeer.
Mm-hmm.
So people would use that, and they'd play the game. And I even went so far as to adding visual effects where if you're quote unquote you have a certain color glow on you.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, if somebody comes to us early enough and there's something that I can actually create and add to the game, then we'll do it if it's feasible.
I think that's awesome. And I had, again, no idea that was within the capacity of the development team.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm usually the one that handles it.
Sure.
So, just come find Jack and talk to me, and we'll see what we can come up with.
That's awesome. I'm glad you added that. That is a color I was not aware on the painting of your role.
Oh, yeah. It definitely it shakes things up, and it actually helps progress the game as a whole. Because like when I became an admin and I was trying to create all of these events, a lot of the tech and mechanics did not exist in the game. So I was building this and building that, and it's like, well, I can't quite do this, I need this. And it's like, let's say, okay. And he'd patch it into the game, and I'd start doing this, and it's like, okay, well, now I want to be able to do this. And he's like, okay, well, we can do this. And I was like, all right, let's give that a try. And more tech comes into play, and we can actually turn around and take some of that tech to create new content for the game.
So, in other words, the tech ideas often bubble up from player ideas, simply playing Project Gorgon.
Yes, there are so many things in this game that have sprouted up completely organic. I mean, the players don't realize it, but they're actually creating and becoming part of the game's lore. For example, everyone who's been around a while knows Greenberg, and it's the deer who loves lemons. And because I mean, he literally has thousands and thousands and thousands of lemons put away in his storages.
Keep going.
And and we kind of started to put little jokes about it in the game. You know, Greenberg's alicorn horn. If you read in the description of it, it mentions that it mentions lemons,
That's hilarious.
and occasionally I'll spawn lemon trees in town where they're not supposed to spawn, and the trees are named Son of Greenberg.
I love it. It's an inside joke.
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
yeah, that sounds to me what the relationship between a dev team and a community should be. It's this dynamic interchange,
Yeah.
and information flows both ways. Inspiration flows both ways.
Yeah, and there's another player who would always run around and boop people on their snoot, or they'd see someone in animal form and they'd walk up and they'd boop them on their snoot,
Yep. Yep.
and
Yep.
just notoriously, and that was the birth of anti-booping cream,
Oh.
which actually gives some protection from crushing damage. You got to protect your snoot.
Yo, that's funny. I had no idea. Now I knew there were I suppose there's been a number of times. This is just my long-term memory finding expression here. I have read the description of items and wondered if there was a backstory to them, because certain details seemed slightly out of place. But now that I'm listening to you, it seems like they're actually even more in place than I had thought.
Yes, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of gear, a lot of items that are all tied to players, and certain things that they have done that have kind of shaped the course of the game and the social aspects of the game. For example, one of our guides named Nif, when I created the Claudia um, for the Claudia world boss for the world boss event, I gave her all of these fast moving death heads that if they touch you, you're dead. It's a one shot kill.
I have encountered those in a dungeon adjacent to Serapule Keep.
Yes, I believe we've got a running of the world bosses coming, and I made some
Oh,
very special ones as ads
oh,
for the
cool.
Claudia session, and they
Yeah.
move extremely fast. They fly. So
Oh,
if you're a bird,
yeah.
they will jump in the air and chase you to your death. So there is no escaping them. If they
Oh, that's
get on
cool.
you, it's run for your life or die. Those are your
Yep.
choices.
Oh, fun.
And he he had a pretty good movement build. So what he would do is he would go out there and he would aggro all of those death heads, and he ran them in a figure eight while everybody else killed the boss. And
Clever.
he did it with such speed and perfection that it grabbed our attention.
Mm-hmm.
And we made a pair of speed boots in his name, Niffian boots.
Oh,
And
cool.
and
That's a
those
fun
are
story.
yeah, and that is kind of it's become one of the legends of the game.
I think that's incredible. That's giving me early EverQuest vibes very strongly.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, a player can come in and they can be quiet, they can be lone wolf, or they can make a difference and actually become a literal legend in the game.
Maybe a little bit of both. I think about your story.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad I happened to ask you if you wanted to add a little bit more detail, because I think that hammers the nail down even more compellingly about how the dev team really almost, and you can shape this idea, follows the actions and the trajectory of the players and really helps
Yeah,
support what they're currently doing.
yeah, and I mean, we kind of pay attention to what they're doing and how they're doing stuff. I mean, that sounds really creeper, but we kind of have to do that in the data gathering process so that we know what we need to tune.
And that's entirely reasonable, right? You wouldn't want to spend thousands of dollars in dev time building a system that through analytics, that 0.00001% of players are going to do.
Yeah, but I mean, some of it is kind of hit and miss. But I mean,
Sure, it's
most
experimental.
of the stuff that we have built into the game in its first iteration has been, well, kind of bad. But a lot of this stuff is, we keep revising,
Well, you
revising,
learn,
revising.
right? I mean, to me, that's another parallel with the Project Gorgon idea of by dying you get better. So there's also a parallel with the development process too.
Yeah, absolutely. And and people, some people do get frustrated with that. But I would like to tell them, bear with us, be patient, give good feedback, give
Yeah.
accurate
Yep.
and very, very, very detailed bug reports, and
Sure.
we will listen and we will iterate to make it better.
I love that. Thank you. We obviously could be talking for many more hours. We've been
Sure.
talking for 3 hours. That I can't express my admiration for your flexibility. I did not intend on that happening, though conversation simply had its way.
I
Uh,
didn't think it was going to fly by like that myself, but it did. So I
it
mean, that's
did.
that's a good thing, though.
It is. It is. Yeah.